Hi, and welcome to section 7 of the Falling into Winter Shawl tutorial series. Wow, that's a mouthful. This is the mock honeycomb stitch, and I really like this stitch, and I left it till last on purpose because at this stage you'll have hundreds of stitches, well 150 odd stitches in each wedge, and that can be slow going, but this is actually quite a fast stitch because you only knit one out of every 4 stitches. So a quarter of the stitches are knit on the front rows and the rest are slipped. So it goes quickly. And it's pretty. I like this one. So this is in the NACO worsted weight yarn, Mona Lisa. And the one underneath here is in a DK weight Hobie Amigo. Now it's not as green as it shows up on camera. It's more muted, more of a sage green. I'm pleased with how the DK weight one turned out. It's a smaller shawl, but you can repeat any section that you like to make it larger if you want. Okay, so I'll put this aside and we'll get started with the actual pattern. So I have my swatch here, and you can see that I've left the couple of rows of the pinhole stitch here, and I've just worked a few rows pretending that it's my separator section. So for the mock honeycomb stitch, it's important, just like the star stitch, to have the same odd number in each wedge. So I'm going to count my wedges. Wedge 1 is when the front is facing you, when the right side of the work is facing you, is the wedge that's closest to the tip of the left-hand needle. So I have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 25 stitches in wedge 1. We don't count the center stitch, so we come to wedge 2, and in wedge 2 I have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 25 stitches in wedge 2, which is good. So I have the same odd number in both wedges, and I can go straight to set up row 1. If you have an even number in one or both of the wedges, or if the odd number is different, then you'll go to the correction section, which is on page 18, and it will give you instructions on how to get the same odd number in both wedges. If you followed the pattern exactly from the start, you would have 133 stitches in each wedge, but so long as the odd number is the same, it doesn't matter if you have more or less, like I have. So set up row 1 is a very familiar row by now. It's just basically a knit row, and then set up row 2 is a purl row. So I'll do those off camera and then I'll come back. So I finished set up rows 1 and 2, and now I need to recount the stitches in each wedge. And this is because, 1, it's easy to forget to do one of the increases, and 2, we need this wedge count to determine which row we start on for the honeycomb stitch, much like the star stitch. So I'll recount 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 4, 6, 7. So I have 27 now in wedge 1. we don't count the center stitch, so come to this side, and in wedge 2 I have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 4, 6, 7, 27 stitches in wedge 2. Now to work out what row of the honeycomb pattern we start on, we need to divide our wedge count by 4. So in my case, I will do 27 divided by 4. And if the result ends in 0.75, then I work rows 1 through 24. If it ends in 0.25, then I work rows 7 to 24 and then rows 1 to 6. Don't freak out that it's a 24 row pattern. We only work it through once. It's actually 6 rows, but then they're offset. So I'm going to grab my calculator. I'll need to turn some lights off because it will reflect off the screen. So I'll come back when I've got that set up. Okay, so I've got my calculator here on my tablet. That's why it's so big. And I type in how many stitches I had in each wedge. So I had 27 in each wedge. And then I divide by 4. And the answer is 6.75. Now I don't care what's in front of the decimal point. I'm only interested in what's after the decimal point. And I have a 0.75. And so that tells me that I need to start at row 1. We'll work a couple of examples here. So if you followed exactly and had 135 stitches, 135 divided by 4 equals 33.75. So again, I'm not interested in what's before the decimal point, just the 0.75. And we saw earlier that 0.75 means we start at row 1. I'll clear that. So what happens if we have, say, 153 stitches in each wedge? Well, I divide that by 4, and that has given me an answer of 38.25. So I'm only interested in the 0.25, and the pattern instructions say if it ends in 0.25, then we start at row 7, work 7 to 24, and then rows 1 to 6. I'll pop this on pause and put the lights back on because there are too many shadows here. So I have the mock honeycomb stitch pattern here, and you'll see that I have a different swatch here. And that's because for every row of the mock honeycomb stitch, what we do in the first set of square brackets, we repeat in the second. So it's a ditto. Every second wedge is the same as the first wedge. And it would take me too much time to get this video out if I had to do both wedges when they're exactly the same. I would be doing them off camera, but that still takes time to do. So I thought I'll just come back with one wedge and I can do that a lot quicker and hopefully get this video up for you much sooner. So if we look at the first row of the pattern, we knit the first 3 stitches, which are our border stitches. We do our garter left increase, and then our first set of brackets, we knit 2, and then begins the repeat. With the yarn forward, we slip 3 purlwise, take the yarn back and knit 1. And we repeat from the asterisk to 1 stitch before the next marker. So yarn forward, slip 3 purlwise, yarn back, knit 1. Yarn forward, slip 3 purlwise, yarn back, knit 1, all the way to 1 stitch before the next marker. So let's see what that looks like. Move the pattern out of the way. So we knit the first 3 stitches, slip the marker, do our garter left increase, and now we're at the first bracket, which says the first instruction is to knit 2, and then we're at our repeat. We bring the yarn forward and slip 3 stitches purlwise, and then take the yarn back. Knit the next stitch, and that was our repeat. So we bring the yarn forward, slip 3 purlwise, and take the yarn back. Knit the next stitch. Bring the yarn forward, slip the next 3 stitches purlwise, 1, 2, 3, and take our yarn back. Now before I do that, I want to say to leave the stitches separated like this, even though you'll have a lot more stitches on your needle and they'll start to scrunch up. If you have them scrunched up too much when you take them back, you can see how much shorter that strand is to the strand where I didn't scrunch the stitches or squish the stitches together. And so that's going to make a pucker in your fabric. It's much like stranded knitting. If you don't have the stitches just spaced out as they want to naturally fall, then you'll shorten this strand and the fabric will bunch up. So just nice and loose, and knit the next stitch. Yarn forward, slip 3 purlwise, yarn back, and knit the next stitch. And now I'm 1 stitch before the marker, and the instructions say to knit that stitch. With 2 wedges you would be doing the right lifted increase, but I'm at my second border, so I'm doing a right garter increase. And for me, I finish out by knitting the next 3 stitches. And you would continue on to wedge 2. So that's the first row of the honeycomb stitch, and you can see our groups of 3. In front of each group of 3 slip stitches is the yarn forward, yarn back. So we have that loose strand there. Now for row 2, it's just a purl row. So apart from the border stitches, which we knit, we bring our yarn forward and purl all the stitches to the next marker. There's nothing to see here really, it just looks like a regular purl row. Even though on the front side we've got those loops, it doesn't affect what's happening on the back. So I'll just pause and get to the end of this row and come back for row 3. So I finished row 2, which was our purl row, and now we've come to row 3. And row 3 is very similar to row 1. The main difference is that we have a few stitches to do before we get to the yarn forward, slip 3, purlwise, yarn back, knit 1, repeat. And that's because of the increases that happen because of the garter left increase and the right lifted increase on the first wedge, and the left lifted increase and the garter right increase on the second. So we've increased the number of stitches in the row, but we want to keep our yarn forward, slip 3 purlwise, exactly where they were on the first row. So you can see this is where we want to put our yarn forward and slip 3 because that's where our strand is. But now we've got 3 extra stitches at the front before we get to that point. And actually it's really only 1 extra stitch because we knit 2 here. So we've got an extra stitch, and these instructions here cater for that so that we can get back on track. Clear as mud? Probably. You'll see when we get to knitting it. So we knit the first 3 stitches. We do our garter left increase, and then the instructions for row 3 say with the yarn forward we slip 2 purlwise this time, only 2. Take our yarn back and knit 1. And now we're at our repeat, which is bringing the yarn forward and slipping the next 3 stitches purlwise. And you can see that it's the exact same 3 stitches that we slipped in the first row. And take our yarn back. Knit 1. Bring our yarn forward. Slip the next 3 stitches purlwise. And take our yarn back. And we're going to do this until we have 2 stitches before the stitch marker. So yarn forward, slip 3 purlwise, yarn back, and see I'm not scrunching them up. Knit 1, yarn forward, slip 3 purlwise, take the yarn back and knit 1. And now I am 2 stitches before the stitch marker, so the instructions say is to bring the yarn forward, slip 2 purlwise and take the yarn back. And now I do my right garter increase, slip the marker and finish off the row, which for me is the 3 border stitches. And so you can see that the majority of the slips are above each other, but at the beginning of the row we have a new one that doesn't have a strand underneath it, and that's because it's the increased stitches. So row 4 and every even row for this pattern is the purl row, the same as row 2. So I'll pause the video and come back when I finish row 4. So I finished row 4 and now we're about to start row 5, and that introduces a new concept. Our instructions say to knit the border stitches, do the garter increase, then knit 1 and then KU1, which means knit under 1 strand and then knit 3, and then we're at our repeat. Knit under 2 strands, knit 3 and repeat from there to the last 2 stitches. So I'll show you what that looks like here. So I knit the border stitches, slip the marker and do my garter left increase, and then I knit the first stitch, and now I knit under 1 strand. So what I do, I take my needle and from below that strand, just straight underneath it, and go into the first stitch on the left hand needle, knitwise, and knit that stitch. And then I bring my needle back down from that loop, and then we knit 3. And now I knit under 2 strands. So I come down below the 2 strands, just take my needle up. So I haven't caught the fabric behind, I'm just under those 2 strands, and I knit the first stitch and then just bring them down. Knit 3 stitches, knit under 2 strands, and the stitch that's here first on the left hand needle is the middle of the 3 stitches that we slipped. So we come under the 2 strands, into the stitch on the left hand needle and knit that, and then bring our needle back down. So we knit 3 stitches. And then we knit under 2 strands, so we come under the 2 strands, knit the stitch that's on the left needle, and then bring our needle back down. Knit 3, again under those 2 strands, into the stitch on the left needle and knit that, and then bring our needle back down. Knit 3, and we are 2 stitches before the stitch marker, so the instructions now say knit under 1 strand, and that's because we don't have the second strand. So under the 1, knit the first stitch, bring our needle back down and knit the last stitch. Now we do our increase. Slip the marker, and I'm finishing with 3 border stitches. And so that's what this row looks like at the moment. You can see that where we went under the strands, it's raised it, so we've got the sort of like 2 sides of a triangle there and there. And then when we do the next repeat, so that was 1 repeat. Sorry, when I finish row 6, so come back and do row 6, that will be 1 repeat. And then the next repeat will be exactly the same process, but it'll just be offset a little bit. So we'll finish the honeycomb. I'll pause the video, I'll do row 6, which is a purl row, and then we'll start on row 7. I've completed row 6. Row 7 is a similar process where we yarn forward, slip a certain number of stitches, knit 1. And in this case, before the repeat, we yarn forward, slip 2 purlwise, yarn back and knit 1. And then the repeat is yarn forward, slip 3 purlwise, yarn back, knit 1. So I won't spend too much time on that, but I'll just show that when you get the feel for this particular stitch, it goes quite quickly on the front rows because you're slipping so many stitches rather than knitting them. So to start, we bring our yarn forward, slip 2 purlwise, take the yarn back and knit 1. And then we're at our repeat where we yarn forward, slip 3 purlwise, yarn back, knit 1. And just remember when you, after you slip the stitches purlwise, not to scrunch them up, but just to let them sit as they do on the needle, slightly apart, and take your yarn back and then knit one. And this time the stitch that we knit is the one that we knitted underneath the strands. So you can see it's sort of like a little hole there. It's a slipped up stitch. And that's the one we knit. So if you feel like you're off kilter with your stitch count, that's a way you can check. So we knit one, we have 2 stitches left, we yarn forward, slip 2 purlwise, yarn back, do our increase, finish the border stitches. What we have here now is the loose strands again. We'll do another row like that, and then we'll do the working underneath the strands. So I'll pause the video and do row 8, which is just a purl row. I've finished row 8 and now I'll work on row 9. Again, it's very similar, so I'm not going to go through too many more repeats of the odd row, but in this row I'd just like to make 1 or 2 mistakes. And the first one that I'll make is I'll forget to bring my yarn forward and take it back. So I still do my garter increase. And I'm at the first bracket, which tells me to bring my yarn forward, slip 3 purlwise, take the yarn back, and then I'm at the repeat where I knit 1, yarn forward, slip 3 purlwise, yarn back. So for this one I won't bring the yarn forward, and I'll just slip the 3 stitches purlwise and knit the next stitch. Yarn forward, slip 3 purlwise, yarn back and knit 1. And this time what I'll do is I've brought my yarn forward, but instead of slipping them, I'll purl them. So 1, 2, 3, take the yarn back, knit 1, slip 3 purlwise, take the yarn back, slip 3 purlwise, and I'm at the marker, so I do my garter increase. And knit the last 3 stitches. Okay, so if I'm looking at my work, I can see that there's no strand in front of these stitches here, whereas there should be a strand. And if I keep going along, I can see again there's no strand, but there's also purl bumps on the front, which there shouldn't be. So let's see what that looks like on the other side. So if I turn the work, I can't really see any difference initially. except for the strand at the back. So because we've got so many stitches, they're going to be scrunched up. You're not going to even notice that strand at the back. So we'll just pretend we don't know we've made a mistake and see what happens on the purl side when we get to those mistakes, what it looks like. So for a wrong side row or an even numbered row, I knit the border stitches, bring my yarn forward, and then it's just purl all of the stitches. So they all look fine so far. Nothing out of the ordinary. But this one definitely, because that bar should be at the front, not at the back. So all we do is we just pop the bar over, purl those 3 stitches, and then drop the bar off. And so now we've got the 2 bars at the front like we should. And finish out the row. Now you'll notice that I didn't correct that the second mistake that I made, where I purled the stitches instead of slipped them. And that's because on the wrong side it didn't look like there was anything amiss. And if we look, we can't see anything wrong with the one that I forgot to bring the yarn forward. I can't even tell you which one it was now. I think it was the middle one, but it doesn't matter because they all look fine. But here I can see that I haven't slipped the stitches, that I've actually knit them, and that there's no bar in front of it. So what happens when we get back to that spot? We're on row 11 now, which is a knit under the strands. Is a knit under the strands one. And so we knit 2, knit under 2 strands, and then I repeat, knit 3, knit under 2 strands, and repeat from there to the last 2 stitches before the marker. So I knit 2 and knit under 2 strands, and the first strand is going to be very short because it was only spanning 2 stitches, whereas the second one's spanning 3 stitches. That's okay. It's just to give the illusion that we had a whole honeycomb there. And now the repeat. Knit 3 stitches, knit under 2 strands. So we come down underneath both strands. So my needle is just between the fabric and the strands, and knit the first stitch on the left needle and bring it back down. And then we knit the next 3 stitches. Bring our needle under those 2 strands knit the first stitch and bring our needle back down. Knit 3, come under the 2 strands, making sure you don't catch anything. Knit the first stitch and bring our needle back down. And now I knit 3 stitches. 1, 2, 3, and now I come to go under the 2 strands, but I only have 1, and that's when I see my mistake, that I've knit that stitch, those stitches, sorry, I've purled those stitches instead of slipped them. So I'll just undo another one. And what can we do here? What we want is for the strand to be at the front. So I'll turn my work around. And I'll undo those 3 stitches. 1, 2, 3. And that strand should have been at the front. So I'll take it over and slip those 3 stitches back to the other needle. And so now I've got this big loose strand here. I'll just undo the previous 2 stitches as well. Okay, so this was my last, when I went under 2 strands and knit the stitch, and then I have to knit 3 stitches. So 1, 2, 3. So they're a little bit looser than they should be. And now I can come under those 2 strands and back down, and they're still a little bit loose, but they'll get taken up. So now I'm back on track. So knit 3 stitches, under 2 strands, back down, knit 3 stitches, under 2 strands, and this is my short strand and a long strand above it. Knit 1, and I'm 2 stitches before the marker, so I just knit those 2 stitches. Do my increase. And knit the last 3 stitches. So we can see here we've got a very elongated stitch. We'll be able to fix some of the tension on that in the next row. So you can see we've got a honeycomb forming in here. So I'll just do the next row, which again is a purl row, and see if we can fix up some of the slack there. Often after washing your shawl or a piece of knitted fabric, some of the tension eases itself out. So I'm pretty sure this is where it is, because that's quite a loose stitch there. So I'll just knit it normally. I'll pull up some of the slack into the next stitch just a little bit, not all of it. And then pull up a little bit more into the next stitch. And that should be enough, 2 or 3 stitches, just elongating it a little bit to pick up the slack. So there was no slack here, I didn't need to do that there. So let's see how this looks now. So you can see on the front there's still a little bit of looseness there. I wouldn't worry about a little bit of a loose strand, loose tension there at the moment. Once you've got more rows on, you won't notice it as much, and then after it's washed it should take up the slack. I was continuing on with the honeycomb stitch, and I realised that I didn't mention one oversight that you could make. So this is in a row where we're going under 2 strands. So what happens if you go under the 2 strands, knit the stitch, but forget to come back down and just go on with the next instruction, which would be to knit 3 stitches. And then go under the 2 strands, knit the stitch, come back down and knit 3 stitches. Go under the 2 strands, knit a stitch, but forget to come back down. And that was the last one, so I finish out the row. This is row 23, so knit 3 to 1 stitch before the marker and knit 1. Now I do my garter, right increase, slip the marker and knit the border stitches. So what does this look like when we've made that mistake? Well, it's pretty obvious when they're spread out. Scrunched up, yeah, kind of. So if you don't notice it, we can fix it easily on the return row. So I'm on the wrong side row. I knit the border stitches. Slip my marker, and then every stitch should be a purl on the wrong side row here. So we'll pretend we don't know we've made a mistake and just see what happens as we're merrily knitting along. Okay, so as I'm coming into this stitch, I noticed that I had these 2 slanted strands. If I turn my work, it's clear to me that I didn't bring my needle down because I've got the strands that I went under and then the stitch that I knit. All I need to do is bring the needle down, turn back to the side we were working on, and keep knitting, or keep purling the stitches. This one's a very simple mistake to fix. Coming up to the next one. But what happens if you don't see it? So your hands are covering it, you don't see it. All you're seeing is the next stitch. And you knit that, you purl that stitch, and that's when you notice that you've got the strands here. So all you need to do is undo the last stitch that you did, turn your work, bring the needle down under those strands, turn back and keep going. And that's how you fix the mistake of not taking your needle back down under the strands. So that's it for the mock honeycomb stitch. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and found it useful. In the next tutorial, I'll show you the last separator section and then how I cast off. I'll see you in that one. Bye for now.